With me today, I have a special guest, Kat Perkins. Kat appeared on The Voice Season 6 and advanced to the show's finals. Mentored by Adam Levine, Kat climbed her way to 4th place.
Do you want to hear how hot Adam Levine is as well?
Well, I'm sure a lot of the women would, but, sure, why not? Absolutely.
It was Blake Shelton, Adam Levine, Usher, and Shakira, and I got a 3-chair turn. It was just like, it was very surreal. It was very exhausting. It makes me feel great to use that word because of how I defined it after reality television. And I guess the definition after reality television was changed because of the results I got by pushing through something so extraordinary and so crazy and so different. Also doing it in front of 15 million people every single week on television. Then Fearless became a very different word for me, and also a very positive word for me.
Welcome to Iron and Empathy, the podcast where we explore what it truly takes to build strong, resilient teams in high-stakes environments. I'm your host, Drew Moldenhauer. This podcast is about forging teams with grit, discipline, and accountability, while intentionally building empathy, trust, and psychological safety so people can communicate openly, perform under pressure, and look out for one another when it matters most. Iron and Empathy is proudly sponsored by Blue Ethos Specialized Training, a national leader in workplace violence prevention, active threat preparedness, and de-escalation. At Blue Ethos, we don't just focus on safety, we help organizations improve workplace culture by strengthening communication, increasing situational awareness, and creating environments where people feel supported, empowered, and prepared to intervene early before problems escalate. Thanks for being here today. Let's get into today's conversation. With me today, I have a special guest, Kat Perkins. Kat appeared on The Voice Season 6 and advanced to the show's finals. Mentored by Adam Levine, Kat climbed her way to 4th place. A native of the tiny town of Scranton, North Dakota, Kat has resided in Minneapolis, Minnesota since 1999, when she began her work in various theater productions and started her solo music career. Kat is open for Bon Jovi and traveled to the Middle East to entertain American military troops. Kat has released 6 albums since The Voice, with 2 of her singles charting inside number 20 on the iTunes charts. Along with full-time touring with her band, Kat founded the Rising Star Foundation in 2017 and runs her own music camp in the Badlands in North Dakota. Music and education is her passion, and she tries to combine them whenever possible. Go to risingstarfoundation.org to find out more. Kat, it is so great to have you on here. I just have to tell you, you are the first person I know from Scranton, North Dakota, which is so cool because I actually looked it up. I went on the interwebs, if you will, and looked up Wikipedia for Scranton, North Dakota, and you were one of the people on there of notable people. So I thought that was really cool. And I just remember, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, we went out there pheasant hunting with a group of police officers. We went out there and absolutely loved it. And I just have to say, with the people of North Dakota, we've been getting a lot of work out there lately. And I had never been to Bismarck, North Dakota in my life. And this year in 2025, I have been out there 4 times, and it has been just absolutely fantastic. The people from Fargo, Grand Forks, Bismarck, a lot of work out there, and the people have been just so great. So awesome to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super honored and cannot wait to have this conversation with you. And yay for North Dakota. I was just actually over there performing. So I try to go back to, when I can.
That's awesome. Very cool. So for people who may not know your full story, how did you get started in music and what drew you to performing in high pressure environments here?
Oh my gosh. I actually don't really understand my life without singing. I think I started singing before I could talk, if you ask my parents. And I really also remember like kindergarten. I remember being 5 years old and singing for the first time on a big stage and having a microphone. And And I remember knowing in that age, like, we're going to do this. I want to do this. And it was after a first performance that I did in front of people that scared the crap out of me. And I was really nervous. And it was sort of like that first adrenaline rush or dopamine hit that I ever got with finding my voice in front of people. And I just wanted to do it again and again and again from that point on. But of course, I didn't have the brain capacity to be serious about it until I was about 15 years old, when I knew I was going to follow that dream no matter what.
That's so awesome. And, you know, I saw when you were performing, one of the coolest things that I remember about this was I remember being a teacher at Anoka High School. I was at the STEP college, if you will, at that time at the school. And we had everyone got together during the first day of school. And it was one of those things, we got in the auditorium and it was really neat. And looking back on that, it was you that came and did this whole thing with David Law. And it was such a cool performance. And you guys got together and you were going all around the school and doing everything. And I was just thinking back on that, how awesome that was. And do you remember working with him on that and doing that whole deal?
Yes, that was one of my favorite things to do. And David Law is seriously one of my favorite humans in this entire world. And I was just really honored to. So I had started motivational speaking about 7-8 years ago. I guess at that time I probably was like 4 years deep or so, 5 years deep maybe, in speaking. And I was doing mostly schools in that first part of when I started motivational speaking, like anywhere from kindergarten to, seniors. And then I was moving into colleges and like moving up until I got to this sort of corporate thing. So coming from a long line of teachers myself, which is like my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my father, my sister, they're all teachers. And so education has just always been very near and dear to my heart. I also was supposed to go to college to become a music teacher until the day that I fearlessly drove by and went to the big city and was like, no, I'm going to follow this dream of performing. So to be able to come back and do like what you saw me at in Anoka, that was so fulfilling for me. And to talk to a bunch of teachers and just, I don't know, and hopefully inspire them and inspire everyone to just, go into that school year very fearlessly and very strong-willed and strong-hearted and logically and, anything I can do to help, anyone's mindset.
That's so cool. Yeah, no, it was a great thing to see. And I'm just kind of curious how you made the transition from Scranton, North Dakota to now living here in Minneapolis and that journey that took course. What brought you to Minneapolis, St. Paul area from Scranton, North?
I mean, the cool thing is about Scranton, North Dakota on the map is like it's equidistant to 2 major cities. So it's 8 hours to Denver and 8.5 hours to Minneapolis. So really, I guess, thinking back in the 90s, late 90s, middle 90s when I was making these decisions, but late 90s when I decided to act on them, it was sort of just like, where's the nearest big city? And then somehow I got to know that Minneapolis had a great music scene, had a great theater scene. I guess I remember how I knew that is because I auditioned for this show called the Medora Musical, which is, they call it the greatest show in the West. Well, it's the only show in the West. And it's like, it's this country western review where I auditioned and I made it. And I played a yodeling tap dancing cowgirl for like 5 years. Only in the summers is what they call summer stock theater. And I made it my senior year of high school. So I met all these people from Minneapolis that were actors and in this show. And there was nobody from North Dakota in that show ever. So it was a very special thing for me to audition and make it. And then, of course, meet all these people. I had friends in that show from Memphis and Florida and all over the United States. But there was 3 people from Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I think the safety of now having these friends and knowing that I could go to this big city and at least have 3 people that I knew that I could talk to and they were telling me that it was very feasible for me to come out and just start auditioning and singing and dancing and performing professionally. And so that's how it all happened. I was literally slotted to go to college. I'd actually started college. I had like 2 weeks under my belt while I was out there doing this Medora show. And I just was like, you know what? The time is now. And I had to be fearless and just like jump in my car and go. And I never looked back. I mean, as terrifying as it was the right thing to do. And there was so much more opportunity in this city. And living here to this day, I love it.
Fantastic. And that's a great lead into the next question I have for you is looking back on that journey from the North Dakota to Minnesota, was there a moment when you realized just how high the stakes could be emotionally or professionally? And was that when you were in college and you decided, okay, I'm going to go this? Because that's quite the leap of faith, if you will. I mean, that is taking a calculated risk. That's one of those things that not a lot of people do. They just say, I'm going to stick on this one path, but you didn't. So was there that moment when you realized just how high the stakes could be emotionally or professionally?
Yeah, I think I wasn't quite probably mature enough to wrap my brain around that definition of it. But I do remember when I first got here and, just like the first few months of living in the big city, and which started to turn professionally pretty fast. But I think emotionally for me, that was the highest the stakes have ever been at that point. And it was really scary. And there was a lot of that voice inside of my head saying, go back home. Like, this is ridiculous. This is scary. This is terrifying. It's too uncomfortable. And the more I pushed through that uncomfortability factor, the higher the stakes got, but also the reward was matching that high stakes. So all these rewards were happening very quickly I think that's what kept me going in that whole fearless moment of like, well, what's the alternative here? And I'm just a determined person. So that also helped. And then it was, like I said, quickly, professionally, the stakes got really high because I started to audition immediately. Within 9 months of living in the big city, I was like one of 4 ladies in a cast of this show called Beehive. And when I was going to work, like my face was on a billboard downtown Minneapolis. And I was like, wasn't even old enough to go to the bar yet. and,
That's so awesome.
And it was really cool, right? And I think looking at that billboard every time I went downtown and had to park, and it was like everything I had ever worked for was paying off. So it was just great that I could push through in that moment because it was not comfy.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, taking those risks can cause that to happen. And I'm just curious because I've heard you mention this a couple times now, and it's the word fearless. What would you say fearless means to you, and what is the significance behind that?
Yeah, I think that became sort of the buzzword when I auditioned for The Voice season 6, went all the way to the end. And I think, just talking to you right now, I've talked about many instances early on in life where I just took the chance and to me defined fearless as moving through something very uncomfortable. But The Voice experience for me actually kind of redefined that word for me, why it's still back in my vocabulary. Like I use it a lot because it's like my buzzword. It's my brand. I mean, it's just a word, but like it makes me feel great to use that word because of how I defined it after reality television. And I guess the definition after reality television was changed because of the results I got by pushing through something so extraordinary and so crazy and so different, also doing it in front of 15 million people every single week on television. So then fearless became a very different word for me, and also a very positive word for me to keep in front of me all the time. I have it tattooed to my arm because success was happening by being fearless, and joy was happening by pushing through those moments where I thought I was scared, and it really wasn't. It was just being uncomfortable. It wasn't fear. Less fear, less fear. It became really important for me.
I absolutely love that. And when I am up on stages and I'm talking with my keynote speech, I talk about when you get comfortable being uncomfortable, that is where you can manifest greatness. And, with just a little bit of my story with that, I was having heart surgery. And when I had that, that was one of the hardest things in my life. And I was so uncomfortable, but I had to start getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And what that led to was, training for these different triathlons and training for other things and starting my own business and getting out there and speaking. So I think there's so much depth and so much awesomeness to exactly what you're talking about, is having that fearless, is, less fear in actually getting out there and doing it. It's just taking that first initial step, I think for most people is so scary. And if you had to, tell our listeners a little bit about that, because you've had a lot of success with this, and maybe they're at home right now and they're thinking of doing something, but they don't want to take that step because it is uncomfortable for them. What would you say to them about that, as far as, you've been there, you've had that experience, you've probably looked at that a couple times and said, should I do this or not? But what would you say to them if they're sitting there thinking about that right now?
Yeah. I mean, in my motivational speeches, I say this, but what I'm about to say sounds very easy. So I don't mean to like minimize it, but I always say, like, picture that uncomfortability part, or that fear, or that, unknown thing, as like just a line. And I actually kind of got this from Adam Levine, my coach, on The Voice. And he was just always demonstrating, like, step over that line of fear, step over that line of uncomfortability, step over the line of, of the unknown. And when you put it that way in your head, or for me, maybe just the visual of like, oh, right, it's just a line. It's just a line on the floor. It's just a seam in the carpet. And then, step over that line. But, I guess the more layers to that is, like, I also surround myself with people all the time, every day, that will hold my hand to walk over that line, that will clap their hands to walk over that line, to push me over the line and inspire me to make sure that it's just a line in my head, and not an actual wall or a blockage. And if it sometimes turns into a wall, then I just picture the Kool-Aid man and, like, bust through it. But I think that's, for me, as like a Capricorn, logical brain person, mostly thinking about it in steps, that helps me. And I think when I visualize something as clean and simple as a line, then it's like, okay, we're going to do this. And what I do know, and the results have shown, that being uncomfortable for that little tiny second of stepping over that line only lasts a very short time. What you get on the other side of that lasts a lifetime. It is life-changing, and it will give you joy, happiness, success, all the things that you really never thought you would. You got to open up that vault and, like, get in there and see what we only live once. We get one shot.
I completely agree with you. And that's where I've always had that phrase too, where that is where you can really manifest greatness, is when you do that. Because then once you start being comfortable, being uncomfortable, that's when you can start taking more risks, more chances. That's when you're doing that. You build up that resilience. So you're ready to do that, and you're ready to face those fears. I think that is so great and so profound. With that, you mentioned Adam Levine. And I'm just dying to hear this, because I saw a little clip of it when you came in and you were doing, the stuff for our school when I was working there. But I'm just curious, could you talk us through that whole process? Because I know people would love to hear that about going on The Voice. I'd love to hear about the whole experience for you.
Do you want to hear how hot Adam Levine is as well?
Well, I'm sure a lot of the women would, but sure, why not? Absolutely.
For me, the process was very different. I think that a lot of people, everyone's going to have their own individual experience when it comes to reality shows and stuff like that. But for me, I don't think I would have never auditioned for that show. Like, I had been a singer my whole life. I had to take a little bit of time off for health reasons. Back in 2011, I took about 3.5 years off of singing, as I ended up with a cyst on my left vocal cord. And so I had sort of retired at that point. Like, I had to retire when I was 27 years old because I went down. And I was just sort of the reality, I guess, and I didn't really think at that point that I would maybe go back into full-time performing. It was impossible for a while. I was in rehab of the vocal cords. I was in speech therapy. I was in, voice lessons. But at the same time, I just changed the course of my life, which was amazing. And I became a nanny and just kind of let go of that and just was very happy taking care of children and having a steady job and great income. And this family they were my friends. But when the voice started to come out, I remember this clearly because it was season 3 that there was a guy from Minneapolis, Nicholas David. And so the kids that I nannied were just such a huge fans of the show, huge fans of Blake Shelton, by the way, which was so funny because I didn't end up on his team. But, and so I'd watch the show with these kids. Well, I mean, it was just a wild transformation. Then I kind of knew what this show was. And people would always say, like, you should audition for these. And I like I said, I never would have. But I had this video on YouTube that went viral. And the producers, apparently for this show, which is true, obviously, they like curate the internet. They curate the internet. They go find people that have viral videos. They go like to certain regions and like, singers in Minneapolis or singers in the Midwest or singers in big cities or whatever. And it came up and they came to me. Without that,
Wow,
I would have never done it. And when they do that, then you get to skip like three rounds in the beginning. It's still, you're like on your way to get to the blinds. Like, I know if people watch the show, The Voice, it looks like you kind of just walk up and do a blind audition, but there's many, many, many rounds before that to weed people down to the blind audition. So I think in my season, it was weeded down to maybe like 170, maybe 200 people to actually just do the blinds. And that took many rounds. So I got to skip all that, jump on a plane and do like one round before the blind auditions. And it was a wild ride. And I think the coolest thing that I can talk about, like pulling the curtain back, is that I was out there for 5 weeks to film that blind audition. Again, you'd have to kind of watch the show to know, but it's a 90-second audition and you try to get these superstars' chairs to turn. And 5 weeks that took to film. And most of that was just preparation. And I think the coolest thing that if people knew was like most of that was actually psychological preparation. We did personality tests. We did IQ tests. We did, you name it, all of those different, ENFP things. And then we saw a psychologist for 3 weeks. And twice a week, we would sit down and talk about our life and sort of unpack things like, how far is this going to be taken? Am I mentally stable enough to go on television like this? 15 million people are going to start watching your story. Are you mentally well? Which is wild, right? And then,
wow.
yeah. And then I got the opportunity to do the blind audition, which some people did not, because the teams get full if you watch the show. And I was like third to last to make a team. On my season, it was Blake Shelton, Adam Levine, Usher, and Shakira. And I got a 3-chair turn. Blake did not turn. And so I chose Team Adam. And that's where the journey started. And it was just like, it was very surreal. It was very exhausting. They take away your phones. They take away your iPads. You have no connection with your family. You have no connection with your friends. You are literally sort of alone in this moment. And it's not easy. And I'm just grateful that it happened the way it did. And I was able to impress them.
Wow, that is incredible. I mean, just thinking about that, that's so great. And you brought up a couple of things that this podcast is all about, especially with psychological safety. And I didn't realize that you had that many tests and a psychologist actually interviewing you, doing that. I mean, that's fascinating. So with that, with psychological safety and performance, in your band or in your singing, what behaviors make you feel safe enough to take those risks on stage? Changing things up, hitting the solo maybe at the end. What is it that behaviors that make you feel safe enough to create those risks?
I think for me, it's very people based instead of like skill based. To sort of what I would like picture as like a bed of confidence, like an actual structure holding you up there. I mean, I've been singing my whole life, so I know, and I have the control over that, and I know where that's basically gonna go. What I don't have control over, which makes me sometimes feel unsafe, is the band members and what they're playing, or what their skill level is. So it's taking me several years to finally land on this group of guys and girls that I have surrounding me on that stage that really make that bed of confidence and make me feel that safety to be able to be the best that I can be in that moment. And as soon as somebody on the team doesn't provide that for me, I get rid of them. It's hard, but for the most part, for the last 12 years of my life, I've been able to really be lucky and have a group of team members, especially on stage, that provide that safety for me and really push me to be the best I can be in that moment.
That's incredible. And you think about that, your band as a team and the highest performing teams have that good psychological safety where you're willing to take some calculated risks. You're willing to speak up if things aren't right. You're not afraid to make mistakes around them because as the team, we're going to build each other up. So with that, have you ever experienced environments where that safety was missing? How did it affect your confidence or performance? And I'm sure this has happened in your past.
I'll skirt around it, but I had a very high profile job for the last few years. And there was a lot of missing pieces in that psychological safety, especially on stage, but mostly, well, I mean, all of it. Behind the scenes, logistically, and touring, and, the team that was behind that operation, I was just an employee. So I wasn't in control of like hiring this team, right? I'm just part of it. And it was definitely missing. So what then would happen I wouldn't be able to actually feel happy or comfy enough to want to be in my position up there and do the best that I can. It sort of gave it this screw it mode sometimes where I was like, screw it. I don't know. If you're not going to do that, then I'm not going to perform well. And I hadn't experienced that for a long time. I would say the last time that I experienced that was in my 20s when I was doing some random odd jobs, odd bands, jumping in with people, accidentally hiring the wrong people for my teams. So it was very surprising these last few years of coming back to that point where it never felt good. And then in my job, it's like those 2 hours go by and you're entertaining the people out there, and that should always feel good. And then I would get done and come home and be like, it never felt right. And I didn't feel like I was performing my best, and I was not happy, so it was like a very layered onion of how many things that start to peel back when you don't have that one thing, that safety or that, thing to make you strive and thrive for the best.
Completely agree with you. And I've even in my own personal life, I've had that with certain areas where I work with certain jobs, and you don't want to speak up if things aren't right because you don't feel safe enough in that environment. You don't want to take some of these calculated risks because you're afraid of what the backlash might be. And it's like you said, you feel like just more of an employee instead of a team. And it's an interesting aspect how you can take that all the way from someone that has had the success you have had in numerous different bands and transfer that to the working world and how people feel like that every single day. And they're stuck in these really bad workplace cultures out there. So fascinating. So when something goes wrong on stage, how does teamwork help recover with the moment so there's not blame or panic that way? Could you give us an example of what that looks like in, maybe a good team versus a bad team? So if something goes wrong with that bad team, what does that look like versus something goes wrong with that good team? What does that look like?
I think it can look a lot of different ways, and I'll speak to like my band, like, because that's the easiest thing to picture when I think of this question. And I think when it's been a bad team or not the right team, there is it feels like you feel very alone. It's like the most alone you can feel because you have 5 other dudes or women up on stage with you, and you know you're not alone, but you just feel completely out there on a cliff. And at some points, it can feel like you're free falling off of this cliff, and there's nobody to catch you, and there's nothing that you can do to stop the free fall. When it looks right, when you have the right team and you have the best camaraderie and you have that safety that you talked about, then it feels like everyone is, jumping on clouds, and like it feels easy. It feels like it probably looks easy too to the outside people, like if you're in the audience, when you see that beautiful teamwork happen up there, I think it probably looks like easy and that we're having a ton of fun. And that is true, because that is what's happening. So my favorite part about that is that it becomes the funnest thing you've ever done. And like, you want to do it again and again and again and again when that team is right, and you feel supported and you feel light and bouncy and you feel like you were born to do that.
That's very fascinating you say that, because I always think to myself, you look at some of these bands out there, and some of these bands have been together 40, 50 years. I mean, Rolling Stones, a couple of these other people. And I think to myself, these people, some of them are in their 70s and 80s. And I just think to myself, how are they still performing? But B, why? And what you just described there sounds just like it. When everything's working out great and you're all getting along and the team is performing well, I'm sure that's just one of the best feelings that you can ever have. And then you look at the other side, and I've seen some bands where it'll hit the news and they even have a fight right on stage and what that looks like, and they break up. So it is fascinating that you say that. So have you seen those cultures too along the way, not just with your own experience, but other ones and friends you've had, where you've seen ones where you're like, I'm almost jealous with what they have over here, and then other ones where you go, boy, that's some dysfunction over there?
Absolutely. I mean, yes. And it's very similar to just like families. It's like family drama, right? So if you like around the holidays, when your friends talk about like how dysfunctional my family is, right? Or how amazing my family is. It's the same exact thing, especially when you're like at festivals and however many, bands I've played with, and also just like surrounding yourself with all the bands in the culture, right? And so it feels like that. And I think the stories are pretty amazing when you start talking to, I'm very social, especially backstage, and talking to bands of their experience and why it works. And then if you're directly seeing that result when you watch their set, you're like, oh yeah, because they're the best people in the entire world, and they have this great team, and they have a great tour manager, and they've got great leadership all the way around. And, with some of these bands, it's like down to the wardrobe person, down to the bus driver. They're like the best humans in the entire world. And it totally shows. And I think being on the back inside of it, like I can see that all the time. And then you see the opposite as well. I've seen many of fights. I've only had it happen in my band one time, in my initial configuration of a band I called Scarlet Haze, where the boys actually got into a fight, and it was like they couldn't even stop themselves on stage. And I just felt like all the stories you hear about the Eagles and all those guys, like when they're on stage walking around going, I'm going to kick your butt after the show. That happens. It happened to me once. But yeah, I mean, you can see it, and it's really fun to actually recognize when somebody does have the right team, especially in this business, because it's very, there's not a lot of bands that stay together for very long, like in my level, in that mid-level of what we call mid-level, I guess. And the ones that do have the great team.
And that's a great point you bring up about not a whole lot of bands last that long. Not a whole lot of them. There's probably very few that do. I mean, like you're talking about that, there's the small, minute that group that can make it all the way. Do you think there's several factors in which comes in with that? I mean, I imagine when you're starting out and you're playing for fun, that's great. But then as you start to build maybe a little bit, and now money starts coming into it, the touring comes into it. What other factors do most people like me who has never been in a band, what other factors can cause some of that to happen? And how important is it to have that communication, that good communication with each other to make sure you're aligned with the same path?
Yeah. Again, what happens is I think the younger that you are, the easier that it is, right? Because you're going to put the most hustle you've ever put into anything. It's like, it's very similar to somebody starting a company out of nowhere, being an entrepreneur, or like, that beginning stages of starting a business is absolute, like you're never not working. You're never not working.
Yes.
And I think as we grew up in my band, it was like, okay, now we have dynamics of girlfriends, boyfriends, husbands, wives. And we stayed together long enough to where the children started to come into this equation. And, every level of all of that makes everything more complicated, difficult. And the pressure is higher because now how much, the financial factor of it. And I would say if you took a poll right now with 100 bands around the Twin Cities where we live, why didn't it work? I would say probably the number one answer is going to be financially, it didn't.
Okay.
And then that second answer is probably going to be the stress level of just like writing the music, being your own promoter. Nowadays, my God, you have to be a video editor. You have to be some sort of like mastermind on marketing, and you have to know how to use your own studio and do your own video. And it's endless. Like, I still get really frustrated at this point of all of that. It's overwhelming. So the stress level is, where it probably breaks up most other people. It does weed the weak out and keeps the strong in my business, which is funny to say, but I'm grateful for that because, it's not for the faint of heart. But yeah, I think, when you can persevere through all those things, that's like, look at Bon Jovi. Bon Jovi is probably my favorite example of all time. There's plenty of great ones, but just knowing that band and like, they all had that same vision and they all had that same goal. So they were able to sort of level up together. And when they started having families and all of those things, they were all doing it together. So they all understood each other. And they all, like, Bon Jovi has one of the longest standing marriages in rock and roll. It's so awesome. Right? But I think that growing together, it helps. Like, in my instance, I never had kids. I never got married. Like, it was like guys were doing it that I wasn't doing it. And there was a disconnect of like me understanding their lives.
For sure. And when you said that too about number one would be financially, would you say it's just not being able to afford things, or is it financially because how the money's going to be dispersed versus, maybe I'm the lead singer. I'm thinking I earn more than maybe the drummer, but hey, I'm the guitarist and I started the band. Or is that way where that communication breaks down, or where would you say it is financially with that they break apart?
Yeah, that communication is so key. That took me a long time to understand, like, just in the structure of how I structure things and how I basically have my whole life, being the lead singer, being the LLC owner, being the now the S Corp owner for me, and just being very open about, how how that goes. Like, you guys get paid X amount. When I say the financial piece of like how people maybe don't make it is because we don't get paid enough. There's been this also wild fluctuation since I've been since 2004, right? Right now in 2025, my favorite line is saying, we are getting paid 2016 prices. There was some weird shift after The Voice that I got to take, right? So from 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, I was able to finally feel like we were getting paid what we're worth. And pushing through that for so many years of just being like, well, you choose to be poor, you choose to always have roommates, and you choose to just eat ramen noodles, right? But at this point, right, I made some sort of breakthrough on that financial piece for my company and how I structure my band and everyone, all the employees underneath everything, the umbrella. But Now in 2025, we're still making 2016 prices, and that is not working very well.
Yes.
With inflation, with, it's like the people that I rent this house from, they don't care if I'm getting a raise or not. They're going to raise that rent. And the storage space that I have across the street for the trailer and van, they don't care how much I'm making. They're going to raise that rent of that space, whether I like it or not. And so this is where it starts to get disconnected in your life, and where I'm coming home saying, I don't know if I can do this because I don't get paid enough. And the company just structurally can't work, and you can't get new tires on the van. You can't repair the trailer when it gets broken. You can't buy a speaker when we blow one, and because there's just no overhead, and it's very, very difficult and stressful.
Interesting. I guess I've never seen that side of things, but that makes a lot of sense when you say that. Wow. Yeah. So things haven't caught up since 2016. That's sad to see. From your experience with this, what would you say leadership wise, what leadership behaviors help those teams perform better under pressure? When you first started, did you have a manager, or did you have, in your world, what did that leadership look like? Maybe it was just somebody in the band, maybe it was actually a manager, whatever it was, but what was it that, from your experience, that helped the team perform better with that great leader?
I think, and I went through a lot of it. So I've went through about 3 different managers, and then basically took it on myself again after COVID, because COVID, I couldn't afford to pay anyone to stay on. So, and it was just sort of the right thing to do. And then after COVID, I was like, you know what, let me try to manage again. But I knew enough after 25 years of doing this that I needed help. So I have what I call a musical director in the company. And his leadership skills are way different than mine. And they're almost, I'm going to say, polar opposite of mine. He has a different way of communication. But him and I together, for some reason, with those opposite styles, absolutely works. And it makes everything very easy. And we get a lot of respect with everyone underneath the umbrella of who handles what. But for me, I guess the important thing has always been just compartmentalization within the organization. So I like to very, very much define like what a manager would look like when I had that. Here's your roles. Here's what I need to do. Here's what the musical director roles are, very clearly laid out, just like any other company. Here's me, the lead singer, but also, kind of the girl with the name on the marquee. So like, I have to protect my name.
Yes.
I have to protect my brand. I have to protect my company. And so I'm sort of the one that's going to micromanage all this in the back end of it, but just sort of make sure that everything's sort of laid out. But for me, it's very much about being very clear about each person's role, even down to like the drummer, and sometimes that's just it. You're just the drummer. There's sometimes when it's like, you're the drummer, and also we need help arranging a couple of these tunes, and we know you're the right guy. So
interesting.
Asking them to do that role when needed. But compartmentalization is very important to me.
And it sounds like clarity with a chain of command and what each individual is going to do. That this is your job, and that is what I expect, and clear expectations with that compartmentalization part of things when you're doing that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, there's often expectation to sometimes push through in performance environments. How do you balance your high standards with empathy for yourself and others, and how do you cope with that? Because that is hard. And notice that you are a speaker, you are a singer, you play in a band, you run a company, you have a lot going on. So how do you balance those high standards with empathy for yourself and others?
I'm not going to say that I'm perfect at it, for sure. And to top it all off, I am like the biggest empath you'll ever meet. It oftentimes gets in my way because I'm thinking about the guy on the side of the road when I drive by that needs assistance with his car, and I want to stop. I want to stop. Like, and I think about him for hours. I'm like, God, I hope he got somewhere. It actually overtakes my life. I'm still in therapy, so I believe in that. And she helps me. But
That's awesome.
but for myself, I think that is where I just experienced it, actually. So this is a really great question. Last weekend we had like 9 shows. Last week we had like 9 shows in 7 days, so already the balance is upset. If you hear me ever say that there's more shows than days in the week, we're already tired. We're already exhausted.
Yes.
And why are we doing this? And so last week I sort of had this big meltdown, and I wasn't allowing myself to give myself grace for what we were up against and what I'm speaking of, in this season right now, which I know this podcast will be in eternity, but right now we're in holiday season. So I only have a few weeks to get holiday shows in, and they're very specific. So that's why maybe the overbalance of like making sure that we do as many shows as I want, or financially to do that in the short amount of time that it happens. So I lost all balance last week, and I had to sort of remind myself to get rebalanced. So for me, when I'm in an imbalance of taking grace for myself, or even in this moment, I lost a little bit of empathy for my team for a second, because I'm exhausted. And I think, it's, I'm not making an excuse. I'm not trying to warrant it. I had to go back to my team and be like, I'm so sorry. That was inappropriate. Like, I'm just tired. I'm tired. And it just came out. So for me, it's like, okay, then I have to lay in bed at night and go, what's the rebalance here? I need to wait the next day. Maybe I don't do anything related to music.
Good.
And that sucks, because music is also my hobby. This is where it gets really confusing, right? So like, it's my job, but it's also my hobby, and it's pretty much everyone else's hobby in my world as well. All my non-musician friends listen to music, want to go sing karaoke, want to go see bands, want to go all the things. And so I'm also part of that. And sometimes I have to not. And in this last week, allowing that empathy to happen was rest. And it was just reevaluation. And I have this handy dandy little notebook that I keep beside me all the time. And I'm like, talking about being a logistical person, I have to like write it down in front of me of like, even if it's just the word relax and get sleep, I put it on there to be like, doing it. But I do something completely unrelated to my job, and I do things to make me happy. I'm a huge crafter. These are my coping skills, because I don't feel like I can ever say that listening to music or writing music is a coping skill, even though it might seem that way. Because it has turned so much into my job, it's no longer a coping skill, and it actually will do the opposite. So I do it because I have to and love it. But when it comes to coping, it's doing crafts, it's crocheting, it's making special gifts for my friends and family. I'm like, I am the biggest crafter next to my grandmother that you will find. And there's just crafts everywhere in this house. And like, there's gemstones and rhinestones and things that I've bedazzled all over the place. Recently I just made a bunch of holiday ornaments out of dollar store items, and like,
I love that.
Made videos about that. And like, yeah, I am a crafter in that moment, and that's my coping. That's my empathy toward myself. That's getting myself grace.
That's so great to hear, because I think that's so important, especially, this year was my first year where I ever came across that, and this, speaking from your background, where when you are so in love with something, and for you that's music, and for me it was going out on my own, speaking, owning my company, doing things of that nature, and it caught up to me with all the travel and all the presenting and doing all that it started hitting me so hard emotionally that I started feeling these physical effects that were stressing me out, that I can't even explain what it was like. And it was almost like this urge where I would have to go to the bathroom all the time, or I'd have to release. And the only way to get that away is by getting some extra sleep or by working out or doing these other things. And really what it was my body telling me, hey, you got to slow down. And as silly as it sounds, actually getting out and mowing the lawn or going for a walk in the woods or doing something like that, that would just help so much. But it's interesting when you're so passionate about something and you love it so much, it can kind of become this addiction that you can't put down. And I love that you said that during those times too, for you'd have to turn music out, or you'd have to do that because you get wrapped up in this vicious cycle and you think it's work, I'm doing all these other things, but it can really start to wear on you both mentally and physically. It sounds like you found a great way with crafting to get through all that and have empathy on yourself.
Absolutely. And I'm also, it's winter right now, but I'm a person that needs to put my hands in the ground. Like, I'm a gardener. I grow my own foods here in the summertime, and like, that's so important for me. And I know that, it's a little hooky dooky, but like, actually grounding and putting your feet and your hands in that dirt makes a huge difference for my mental stability, just sort of my calmness. And like, I love it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Being one with the earth and they talk about these things like forest bathing, a couple other things, and like you said, physically putting your hand in dirt is just amazing. So that's so great. And I think that's so important for everyone to have some kind of escape that they do, especially in this world where we get so wound up with all this stuff. So that's fantastic. Well, just have a quick couple last questions here. What would you say would be your biggest piece of advice for people out there with the success that you've had today? If you could say maybe 1 to 2 things that people are listening to this and they're thinking, okay, I want to go down that path that Kat Perkins did, that made that leap out of going from college to following her passion, doing that kind of deal. What would be your biggest piece of advice for the success that you've had that you would share with others, the wisdom that you could pass on?
I think that, I've answered that a lot of different ways, but I think right now, I've had to give this advice a little bit. And I think it's more about just being open. So if I could have told myself long time ago, be open to change, be open to processes, be open to different routes to get to that same goal. And I think there's so many times where I was very shut off and very stubborn and determined, which is great. It's a great attribute, but that I was not as open to, looking at things differently and or taking advice from people. And I think what happens when you keep yourself that open, that you start learning so much more. And once I started to really learn and educate and it was just so much more powerful in the success moment to know that I learned something. A lot of times that came with failure, by the way, and learning and being open. But I think that's when you learn the most, right? But being so just willing to have an open mind and learn from everything that happens to you, I think the more success will follow that. And I think you will also start to inspire others around you, especially on a team, situation like I have. If I'm open to having an open mind about change and willing to try new things and like doing what feels right, making the next right move, then I'm inspiring them to do it as well. And I think that's when it becomes the most powerful, because then they'll do it with other people. And it's this beautiful infinity circle of learning, educating, success, joy, happiness, learning, success. It just keeps going.
Gosh, I love that. I mean, I can speak to that so much, just like what you're talking about and being open. And I remember when I first started as a police officer over 18 years ago, I thought to myself, I'm going to be chief of the city of Ramsey Police, and that's it. That's my only direction that I'm going to go. And I put in for sergeant twice. I was denied twice. And exactly what you're talking about, that's when I started figuring out, okay, I failed twice here. Now, I can either go down this path where it's really bad and I'm just going to be disgruntled and I'm not going to get to where I want to go, or I can open myself up and really let the universe take control and figure out where I'm supposed to be. And then starting my own business, it was, okay, when we first started, we wanted to be a law enforcement training company. that didn't last too long because we figured, this isn't where we're supposed to be. So what else are we open to? And now it's training people out in the public. It's training these other organizations, manufacturing companies, healthcare systems about de-escalation training. But again, everything you're saying about being open to this and then showing that to others is very inspiring. I absolutely love that. What a great message.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Now, Kat, how can people get a hold of you or book you to come see you sing or speak at their next event? Because I saw you and I shared the stage in Bismarck, which was awesome during our speaker get together. And I was just absolutely fascinated with you. And I loved the way that you got up there and you not only spoke, but you sang a little bit and your voice was incredible. So for our listeners out there, how could they get a hold of you to book you or to have you come out and sing or speak?
Yes. Wildly, in 2025, websites are back. I feel like, how many times have I sat here and been like, well, I don't know if anyone goes to websites anymore, but they're back. KatPerkins.com is like the easiest. I have like QR codes everywhere, like on when I'm performing live, that'll take you straight to that, because you can also email me through that. You can also see what I'm doing. If you want to come see a performance, you can book me through that website. It's got everything. And then, of course, as a good millennial does, she's got the socials.
Yes.
We've got Instagram.
Absolutely.
Kat Perkins Music. We've got Facebook, Kat Perkins Music. Everything social media is Kat Perkins Music. And if you forget all of that, if you just type in Kat Perkins to the Googles will show you where I'm at.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And hey, that's how I found out Scranton, North Dakota. Notable people, Kat Perkins. I absolutely love it. So very cool. Well, as we wrap up, what stands out to me from this conversation is that high performance doesn't come from pressure alone. It comes from trust. Whether it's on stage, in a boardroom, or in a crisis, the teams that perform best are the ones where people feel safe to speak up, take risks like Kat Perkins, and support one another when things don't go as planned. Psychological safety isn't about lowering standards. It's about creating the conditions where people can rise to them together. That balance of strength and empathy is exactly what we mean here on Iron and Empathy. Thank you for spending time with us today on Iron and Empathy podcast, and thank you, Kat, for being my guest.
Thank you so much.